is for the fans. For the fans.
What I like to think is that that's the back of your head.
Hey, I'm Brian. I'm facing backwards tonight.
Everything's looking good so far. But it usually cuts out. Like, what's weird is it usually... I think it just must be like the bandwidth over time. Also, if you're watching, if you happen upon the channel, it's just our logo right now. So, hey there, we're streaming, but we're just testing out our system. So, we're not starting the episode for another 10 minutes. But yeah, I think it looks pretty good. So far, it looks pretty good at this bandwidth. So I think we're going to stick with a lower bandwidth for now so that it doesn't cut out. Because that's my biggest annoyance during the podcast is if it cuts out on us. So, looks pretty good. Pretty
good.
So, yeah, we're ready to go. I feel like maybe we can start by talking about our histories with Kevin Smith, and maybe a little bit. We could talk a little bit about Red State for a moment, and how that leads into or does not lead into this movie. How it set our expectations, or.
That should be great since I have never seen Red State.
Okay. You're in a fine place then, honestly.
Yeah.
Part of me wishes I never had because it's just yeah. I loved Kevin Smith for a while, and I don't dislike him now. It just got to that weird point where, you could only love him or hate him kind of deal. There's no middle ground. And then I was just super disappointed about Red State because it wasn't a horror movie.
Well, we save it for the juice.
You save that
Save
ire.
the juice.
I don't have ire.
Speaking of this is off topic, but speaking of saving the juice, the first time I ever heard of that concept of like I need to save my fluids was from the movie Disturbing Behavior. Do you remember that first scene where he cracks that girl's neck like he's?
Yeah.
That's from the very beginning, right?
Yeah, when they're in the car and Steve Railsback, the sheriff, comes up and and I love that movie.
I do too. It's so underrated.
Paranoia.
Everybody's gonna get you. But still, that's not the best song.
That's the "Got You Where I Want You."
The Fly song, the only Fly song worth knowing, but damn, is it a fine song worth knowing?
Yeah.
Brian,
what are you
really
doing? Underrated. So if you haven't seen that, go watch it. Like right now, just skip us and go watch Disturbing Behavior. If you hadn't seen it, if you've seen it, listen to us.
Yeah. I think there's a point where there's a lot of good horror coming out that's like current, but I think at a certain point we could do some really underrated. Disturbing Behavior is one of those movies that just in the wake of Scream just kind of it disappeared, or it kind of went unnoticed.
Well, it came out in the summer. It came out the same weekend that Saving Private Ryan came out, I believe. So it kind of got ate up at the box office, and then everyone was just, it's done, and at that point, if something didn't do well at the box office, there wasn't really another tier to go to. It's just looked at as, that was that shitty movie that nobody went and saw in theaters, and that was just the assumption made about it.
Did it also come out around the time of Scream 2, or is that?
And The Faculty.
No, The Faculty was 98. Was Saving Private Ryan also 98? Maybe it was. I think it was.
I think they're all 98.
Yeah, I just remember
Scream 1 was I think Scream 2 was 97 because Scream 1 was 96 and Scream 2 came out like a year later.
Yeah, 97.
So
you sound good on your end, Tyler?
Yeah, everything sounds good. Both sides sound good to me.
All right, cool.
Yeah, Disturbing Behavior 98. Man,
the video looks good too.
So yeah, but it like I said, it did get just kind of got July 24th, 1998. That's a terrible.
That's a day after my birthday.
Yeah, that's a terrible day for that. I remember going to see it. I went to get tickets for Saving Private Ryan, and watched Disturbing Behavior, and then got the tickets, and then went home, and then came back because we used to have to drive like 30 minutes to go to the theater. And so we'd go, and so we'd try and see something else while I was there. And so we watched that, and then went home, and then went back to see Saving Private Ryan with my parents and to see that.
I think that was like during a time period where I don't think they'd figured out quite where to place horror movies too. Because what sucks about Disturbing Behavior is that it's kind of it was released because Scream was popular. It's another high school horror movie. It's different. Like it's totally not Scream, but it's also like released during the fervor of that movie, if that makes sense. Like in the wake of that movie, it was released. So
it was that awesome Stepford kind of sci-fi horror angle that had like the Stepford teens kind of deal.
Yeah, it was Stepford plus it was. I mean, it wanted you to compare it to something from Vonnegut, but it's totally not.
There was the guy that at that time in the late 90s was Dean Koontz had a book that was disturbingly like Disturbing Behavior. Maybe it was based on Disturbing Behavior. It may have been based on the book. But
I don't think it was based on it. It was an original screenplay, but it might have been,
influenced.
Yeah.
What book, Brian?
I'm trying to think.
Yeah, that's it. Try and figure out a Dean Koontz book just by title. That's nearly impossible.
Fear Nothing. That's the only title I got right now. Watchers.
It was really awesome. That's one of his best, one of my favorites. But it was really cool to have Bruce Greenwood in Disturbing Behavior. Steve Rails back.
Was that the janitor? It was the janitor.
Sadler.
Was it William Sadler?
I think so.
Like just doing a really weird
Pretty sure.
accent, or like a.
He likes to be weird sometimes, but I'm pretty sure that was.
Hold on, I'm just getting the volume right. I'm not playing you off. Okay, that'll be right.
Yeah, that was one of my personal favorites.
Yeah, maybe it was William Sadler. He had
Yeah. I just looked to make sure, but yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, because he had a really interesting horror career in the 90s. Because I first remember him from Demon Knight.
Demon Knight.
Right.
I liked that movie. I remember renting it and thinking, "Oh man, this is awesome."
I saw it in the theater.
Did you?
Yeah.
It was not bad. Like
I saw Demon Knight in theater too, actually.
I think if it had a better follow-up, maybe. I don't think Bordello of Blood was a great follow-up because it just didn't know what kind of movie it should be. They could have branded the Tales from the Crypt. Huh?
I did not see Bordello of Blood, but I saw Demon Knight in theaters. I remember that.
It had Angie Everhart in it.
Yes, we gotcha.
Bordello of Blood had Angie Everhart, and that was the reason to see that movie. Not Dennis Leary. God damn it! What's
Miller?
Dennis Miller was the protagonist. Like he did not make the leap to the silver screen very well.
I remember at the Demon Knight movie there. At one point, one of the ushers was actually a midget and came waddling down the
little person.
aisle. Well, he came waddling down the aisle with his flashlight, and it reminded me of the weird tequila bottle creature from Poltergeist 2, and it scared the shit out of me.
Interesting.
I think I literally screamed. I was like, ah! How would you like it if any time in your life you were screamed at when gazed upon?
Just for existing? Yeah, that would be pretty horrifying.
I wouldn't.
22-year-old guy in the audience screamed tonight.
You guys ready? It's 6:15, 7:15 your time. Let's do this. You ready, Brian?
I'm ready.
Okay. Let me check. All right, let's go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HorrorBull Podcast. Blinded by the light, wrapped up like a docent, you'll be humbled by the might. I'm Brian.
I'm Tyler.
And I'm Drew.
And welcome. All are welcome. Hey, guys, follow us on Twitter at HorrorBullPcast, HorrorBullPcast. Everywhere else, we're the Horrible, HorrorBull. Okay. On the internets.
The original HorrorBull Podcast.
The real HorrorBull Podcast.
We are not Coke 2. So yeah, this week we're going to be talking about a movie that's gonna be weird. This is gonna be a weird conversation. I'm because usually I can anticipate what we're gonna talk about with a movie. I can anticipate the directions it's going in, but this time I don't quite know what you guys think about it. Brian, I can't look at your. You look like cousin. This looks like an Addams Family podcast.
What are you talking about? This is how I look every day.
That's how you type. For listeners out there,
I outlasted Tyler.
You did. I was gonna just let it go, but I just can't. I want to see what your face looks like. Like I just want to see your reactions to things.
I want to see what you've done.
So for those who are not on the live stream, Brian was visual jokes.
Brian had his Brian.
I
love it.
Visual jokes.
Ricky Henderson. Ricky Henderson.
So yeah, tonight this episode is Kevin Smith's Tusk, which I kind of like that we're doing this because I kind of like to talk about Kevin Smith, and I kind of like to talk about man walruses. It's probably my second favorite thing in the world to talk about.
This is gonna be the sexiest podcast all year.
Walrus Man was a great Star Wars figure.
You mean Momo? No, it's not Momo Nadon. That was Hammerhead.
Yeah, but
who was Walrus Man? What was his real name? What bullshit name did George Lucas give Walrus Tusk Man? Snaggletooth. I think his name was Snaggletooth.
No, Snaggletooth had just a snaggletooth, and he was the guy with the snout. That was Snaggletooth.
Damn
he was
it.
one of the small figures.
Yes, he was one of the small.
That's Snaggletooth.
He always fell to my Darth Vader figure.
Oh yeah, always.
Holder.
Or you could put two in the same slot. That was a nice thing. Because for some reason I had more than one Snaggletooth. Because you needed that. You needed multiples of him.
I imagine, Drew, you having a multitude of Darth Vader figure holders.
No, I only had one Darth Vader figure holder. I had multiple figures of certain.
I like to think you had them. I think you had multiple ones with masking tape with 1, 2, 3, and them organized as.
Well, it sounds like you're more talking about yourself at this point.
So as far because we've had discussions about whether or not to talk about Red State, Kevin Smith's previous horror movie in quotation marks, air quotes.
I can't
horror
give it
movie.
that designation.
So this one, I think this one fits into a similar sort of milieu of kind of horror movie, but not like I came in for to give a bit of background. I came into this movie based on the podcast episode, The Walrus and the Carpenter of Smodcast. I think it's episode 259, and I expected something a little bit more straightforward horror, like this, like cheesy and hammer horror, but still horror nonetheless, and came out thinking that it was more of a absurdist comedy, right?
Yeah, no. Excuse me. Sorry.
Brian's getting those Christmas time blues.
Johnny gave me something in the van on the way up. I think it was an absurdist comedy, but I really liked it for its kookiness. It was just kind of that Frankenstein story of almost a mad scientist building a creature, but his insanity as to why he built this creature,
and what creature
was Michael Parks just made it it was. Yeah, I was like, man, this guy is just batshit insane.
I liked it too. I think I kind of watched it on a whim. I went to see it on the night it opened in the theater because I was really excited about it, mostly because of the podcast. And I took Kate along, and she had no idea what the fuck this movie was, and so she came out thinking, halfway through, she's like, "What is this?" And I can't disagree with her. I mean, as we were walking out there, people were like, "Well, he just gypped us out of $13." And I can see how, this is a movie that I really enjoyed because it takes a lot of chances. It is just the movie that it is, and it's not trying to be anything. And it still has some, skill and craft to it, but it's still such a bizarre movie. That it exists is, a testament unto itself.
That Kevin Smith is still allowed to make movies is a testament as to him, too. It's just because, I would say his high point as far as films go was Chasing Amy,
right.
Which probably his most
ambitious, heartfelt,
accessible film.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I really love his just the fact that he is making these films basically so he does not have to do anything else the rest of his life. Like, and if you listen to the podcast, I think, the podcast on the film, the Not See podcast, spell it. Make sure you spell it.
Yeah. They hung up on me.
They are doing. I mean, they are basically Scott Mosier and Kevin Smith. Justin Long is Scott Mosier in the fact that he will go out and do stuff. What's his name?
I think he's kind of
Joel Osment is the Kevin Smith in that Kevin Smith won't do anything. Like, he will refuse to leave his house and wonder why Scott Mosier will go and do stuff like, oh, I went surfing this weekend. Why? I can watch videos about that. Why would you go do that?
Yeah, I think it's more of a combination. I think Haley Joel Osment and Justin Long are a combination of Kevin Smith because he is simultaneously very ambitious, but also is in his own world of like how he does things, because he started an entire podcast network. He started Smodcast in 2007 before people really knew what podcasts were, or maybe 2006. I started listening to it when it was just him and Scott Mosier sitting in his studio talking with music. Like, they would literally play music underneath it as they talked. And it was, there was no such thing as there wasn't a podcast format. It was a weird,
Ricky Gervais had their, I remember listening to him and Ricky Gervais and Carl Pilkington and
Stephen Merchant.
Stephen Merchant would do a podcast as well. It was just, they were just the only ones you could listen to.
Yeah. And it's interesting because at that point I didn't understand what the appeal of a podcast was, because I thought at that point in my life, I thought everything needed to go somewhere, that it couldn't just be an interesting conversation that you sort of got to be a fly on the wall. But I still listened to it because it was Kevin Smith. But if it were anyone else doing that podcast, I'd have been like, fuck this. This is not interesting to me because it's just two friends having fun. But
I do like how they have to address what a podcast is.
Yeah, in the movie,
quite a few times. What is a podcast? It's like a radio show.
Especially you sound like that's just what my mom said.
So just to get the movie kind of started, Justin Long goes in search of this internet meme and ends up in the hands of Michael Parks' character, who is just an insane person. And what's weird about this movie is that the beats in the movie are almost note for note what they talk about in the podcast. Because, this movie is born out of Kevin Smith and Scott Mosier sitting around. They thought they had found this really weird news story and, almost like a Craigslist ad from England. And just, they went with, they wrote basically the entire movie in a podcast episode and then just said, hey, if people want to see this movie, #Walrus yes or #Walrus no. They got more yeses than nos, then they just went for it, and this is the result. It's just a crazy experiment, and that's the glee with which this movie was made is the thing that carried me through the entire thing.
Well, I think that's ultimately, like you said, where it ends up being successful. It's my favorite Kevin Smith film I've watched in I don't know how long. I loved it. I thought I absolutely loved every second.
I did too.
Of it. Yeah, there's some things where there were some things with
Johnny Depp.
Ancillary characters that come later that I didn't like as much, let's say. But overall, everything Michael Parks did was so fantastic. The absolute insanity with which he kept telling the doctor story. Yes. Well, he's on his rounds, and he's and he holds to these lies that you can tell the guy's kind of starting to see through, but he just holds to them, and he's so fantastic at all of that.
I'm glad I'm in good company.
He's so fantastic.
I didn't realize until today that Michael Parks was the guy in Kill Bill.
Yes.
That was the Hispanic version of Michael Parks that I suspected was Michael Parks, but I didn't realize until I looked it up. I was like, oh, he is Michael. That is
the
Michael
guy with
Parks
the scar at the end, right? Doesn't he have a scar, or does the girl have a scar?
The girl does, but I was like, that is Michael Parks, and he plays the Hispanic kind of pimp, but also father figure of these women. Yeah. I was like, that's why I love that character so much, because it is Michael Parks.
He's a great actor. It's amazing that he has gone his entire career and has been in these really interesting utility roles, but the dude can act his ass off. And it's weird that Kevin Smith is bringing out some of his best. Regardless of what you say about Red State, Michael Parks' performance is amazing.
And that's what I was going to say. That's literally the only reason I would recommend watching Red State is for his performance, which is fantastic.
Well, I read that Johnny Depp's character was actually written for Quentin Tarantino.
I can see that.
Quentin Tarantino was too busy to do it, and also that do you know Michael Parks was actually blacklisted in the late '60s, and nobody would hire him for his outspoken ideals on how actors should be paid and stuff like that.
Wow, I did not know that.
I didn't realize that, so it's kind of like the people that have brought him back to circulation, the Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Smith, are these guys that grew up with him in the 60s and 70s, loving his films and TV show. That I think he was in a TV show called Bronson or something B.
Well, he also, these are also people who are, Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith kind of work outside of the studio system as well. So it would seem a great fit that his personality would fit in with those guys who were just very, Robert Rodriguez, it comes to mind as well as people who are just outside of the mainstream of how to make films. So yeah, I did too. I'm glad I'm in good company here because Kate's not a horror fan, so she was bereft of how to talk about it. She was parts of it were funny, but parts of it were way too weird for me to buy. There were certain things that she was, the ending, I think, really hit a very sour note with her, just the way that the movie ended. But there were parts of it where she was laughing out loud. And she said that Justin Long's character was ridiculous, but I thought he was spot on for what he should have been for this film. His just sort of hubris and whatever is just so interesting. He's not the kind of character that people write these days.
Yeah, but and Kevin Smith did a great job with giving us just little clues as to who he was as a person too. Like the fact that he was a failed comedian, you would see little hints dropped, and even Haley Joel Osment had his screen on his computer was Justin Long on stage, doing comedy. But I would say that my only problem with Justin Long was that he was just too much of an asshole, and I wish he'd been a little more
sympathetic.
He's a Roth character. At that point, I'm okay with the bad things happening to him, and I'd rather not be on that side of it. I'd rather not be. Yeah, I can't wait till this guy fucks this guy over. This guy is an asshole. In Hostel, that's still the problem. I don't want to pull for Paxton at the end. No. He's no better than anybody else.
Right.
Well, I still think he has an element of sympathy to him. I think Justin Long pulls off the character because even though he's a jerk, but you can if you pay attention to the sorts of things that he says, he's this way because he's the optimist who has been wronged, the optimist who has grown sort of cynical with the world. That's what a cynic is. And so I sympathize with his sort of I don't know, he wanted to do something earnestly and it didn't work out, so he did this other thing and he does it because it's popular, and then even though you can tell it kind of should or does drain his soul. I don't know, I maybe that is the problem, is that Justin Long doesn't he's okay with being called the Nazi podcast. I don't know, it's a pun podcast like ours is, so
but still it's a Nazi pun, you know,
which is that's, I just could not imagine. In the quiet of your own home, yes, I could see being on that podcast, but saying that is your sort of business title, and that is how you make your living, I could not imagine saying that to people.
Spell it.
Also, I'm sorry. One of my biggest problems I had with the whole thing is that podcast didn't seem good enough for him to be making a career off of.
Yeah,
I was looking and say, oh, okay, well that
didn't he say he made $100,000 in ads to his girlfriend?
The video, and he had all the merchandise and everything. It's I'm not seeing how that. I was not seeing how the little bit they showed us of that podcast in no way, shape, or form showed me why it was so it was so valuable.
Because Kevin Smith has been extremely successul in his podcast. He probably doesn't really understand how people aren't successful.
It's called being famous and then having a podcast.
I also think he acknowledges I can't believe how lucky I am to be this popular with this podcast.
Oh, that's what's great. That's what's always endeared me to Kevin Smith, is that he is so happy that people still love him, and everyone who fell in love with Clerks and Mallrats and Chasing Amy are the people that will still follow him no matter what. I mean, I'll fucking see Clerks 3.
Yeah, I will
because,
too.
Oh, certainly.
because I grew up, or not, I came of age at that
Because
point.
Clerks was really good, and
Yeah.
I like those characters, so I'd like to see more happen with them.
the first time that I ever heard like Star Wars referenced as many times as it was in that film,
Right.
as kind of endeared me to Kevin Smith. But regardless of that, like, I mean, he has no real directorial style, and which he's been accused of a lot in his career. But this, I mean, I really did just find myself giggling at this film like I was hoping to. Like, he didn't take it so seriously. The fact that this guy, this batshit crazy man, is making a walrus to remember a walrus from his past that saved his life.
That story is so glorious. Just like, that's the thing I really did enjoy about this movie too, is that I don't know, like, there's something about the writing. The tone was all over the place, first of all, but it had a weird consistency in being all over the place. It was genuinely funny. I expected it to be the first part is really absurd, like, and I think he's making fun of YouTube because the guy accidentally cutting his leg off. It looks really dumb and really stupid. And the fact that they would try to track down this kid, I mean, it was weird. And I was like, oh no, I'm not gonna like this movie. I don't like this. I felt such anxiety about whether or not I was gonna like it but once it settled into the comedy, especially the scene where Justin Long wakes up and has his leg taken off. The scene about the doctor is one of the finest moments in I've seen this year in a horror movie.
When he talks about the brown recluse and just the links he goes to make that story not even believable, but to keep selling it though.
Yeah, I loved it because, I mean, like, the dramatic irony of the fact that this guy just doesn't. It's the thing from Summer is like, do you even fucking realize how crazy you really are? He doesn't. Like, Michael Parks' character absolutely does not really believe how fucking crazy he really truly is, and he is. Like, he is crazy.
Well, yeah, and his excuses were even poor, like with the phone one. Oh, well, he got rid of all the phones. He didn't want you to be disturbed. So there are no phones.
I actually want to rewatch this movie. I mean, it's weird. I mean, there's something about the substance of Kevin Smith's like his dialogue that makes me want to rewatch it. There's something about the rhythm of his speech that is just so fluid and natural that I like. And a lot of people are going to disagree, and a lot of people hate Kevin Smith, and I recognize that.
This movie.
Yeah, and I went into it knowing that a lot of people hated this film, and I thought, oh great, it's just going to be a horrible piece of shit. But I strongly disagree. Yeah. I thought that it delivered the goods. I mean,
it's the kind of movie we started this podcast to like.
Yeah, it's a film about, it's a Frankenstein tale. The guy's trying to create a creature, and whether he succeeds / fails.
He succeeds and fails over and over and over again, as is revealed at the end of the movie,
which is great. Like the end battle. And it's fantastic. I mean, I know we've made jokes about to ourselves, like, "Oh my God, can I sing Fleetwood Mac's Tusk while this podcast is going?" When that song started,
I thought of you.
Playing, I was like, "God damn you!"
I thought of you immediately as they were rushing. I was like, Brian's gonna fucking lose his shit over this scene. He's gonna love this.
And I did. Much. I was like, I clapped. I was like, yes.
I think that's ultimately. I mean, he had even said this to you earlier. He had to. There's no way not to, because that's what everyone, that kind of audience that he attracts is going to expect that. Not just expect it, want it, and deserve it. I mean, that's the joke that it needs to end being built around. Almost.
It does. But in this day and age, when
it worked.
Yeah, it worked, and it was glorious. Like
I agree.
That last battle scene was like, oh yeah, fucking Tusk.
I was embarrassed for people who didn't know what they were getting into. I fully hearing the podcast episode. I knew exactly what this movie was going to be, and it was more than the movie I wanted. I would have been satisfied with a lesser film, and people I keep wanting to qualify my opinions because Kevin Smith is such a what would you call him?
Polarizing?
Polarizing. I couldn't think of the word polarizing. What the hell?
Like I said
I can't
earlier,
believe I thought of polarizing.
Like
I know.
I mean, it's coming down to the point you either you can love him or hate him. You can't have a middle ground because
you can't say whatever.
If you hate him, then his vicious fans jump on you like rabid dogs, and if you say you love him, then the people who are
they say you have no taste. Like
he can't.
So like everything I say, I'm just gonna stop qualifying because I feel like I should. Like everything, I'm like, well, I see what people say, but I really liked a lot of this movie. I mean, I think that he got too enamored with the fact that Johnny Depp is in this movie, and so he spent way too much. Like I think Johnny Depp, if this movie had been successful, Johnny Depp could have been like Kevin Smith's Ben Affleck for the 2000 teens. You know what I mean? Like Michael Parks is that person right now, but that's the Guy Lafitte. Is that it? Was that the character's name?
He's basically playing Inspector Clouseau.
Yeah.
Wasn't he?
I was going to say he's more like it was Johnny Depp as Peter Falk,
Right.
as Inspector Clouseau kind of deal. It's very Peter Falkish with like the eyes and this and the makeup on him and things like that. I didn't even realize that's who it was at first. That's what Gina said. Is that Johnny Depp? And I'm like, no. Nah, come on. And then as it went on, I was like, no, I think you're right. Actually, that is.
What was his name?
I-
Guy
when I looked up
Laforge.
the
Guy Lafitte. What was his name? Guy Laforge.
Lapointe.
Huh?
Guy Lapointe.
Guy Lapointe. Because that's a character that they've brought up in podcast episodes before in Smodcast. I think.
Really?
So. Mm-hmm.
Did you listen through the credits? They actually air the podcast discussion of the.
That's awesome.
And because they're talking about the song, like that's just playing the Gerard Way song, like that they got him to write and perform, I guess, over the end credits. that is just some. It's not terrible, but it's perfectly fitting for the end of that because it's so not fitting. Oh man,
I do like that Kevin Smith and Johnny Depp both managed to shoehorn their daughters into the film.
Which it works. They're also going to be in the next part of the True North trilogy, Yoga Hosers.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he's making 3 movies.
I saw that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think they are the protagonists of Yoga Hosers, or they're just going to be like characters, main characters, or ancillary characters. They might be like the Jay and Silent Bob of this trilogy. And as far as like Kevin Smith,
that convenience store called Quick Stop? I didn't pay attention. Was that
I don't
convenience
think
store called
so.
Quick Stop?
That would have been too. I don't put it past him, but
too on the nose.
one thing that I'm really excited about, though, about this stretch of Kevin Smith's career is that he's just making really weird movies that no one else would or can make. And I kind of like that. Like, this movie is not a movie anyone else could have pulled off or made. And I'm interested to see what Yoga Hosers is going to be, and Moose Jaws is going to be awesome. Like, I don't care if it's terrible, it's going to be awesome. Because it's just Jaws with a moose. And like, that is an amazing premise. A Canadian Jaws.
Well, the cool thing is though is that in the current climate we live in, as far as the way films are distributed, is that you don't have to have a successful
commercial
first weekend.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to make $100 million the first weekend. You put it out on VOD, you put it out, let people see it. People like it, people don't like it, fuck it.
The weird thing about this film, though, is that I think the hype around the sort of way that it's getting, like the everything surrounding Twitter and the way it was made, I think ruined what could have been a much more financially successful movie, because it made $1.8 million, which was, it tanked financially. I mean, it only cost like $5 million, so not really, I think, but it wasn't available day one on VOD. We couldn't just sit at home and watch it, and that, like, at least in the area where I live, and I think that, like, having it be distributed via theaters the first weekend probably ruined a lot of the buzz of the movie, because it got bad reviews and people didn't want to go see it, and it didn't get a lot of return business. So I think if you had done VOD originally, then it would have been a much more financially viable film. I mean, it still it made money. Go ahead.
Wasn't it supposed to be VOD at first, and then they got a theatrical release?
Yeah,
I think that's what it was, because I was kind of hoping it would come out in the summer so we could talk about it, but then the theatrical release pushed the VOD back
to September, I think, right, or October or something.
Yeah, I think you're right. But Kevin Smith's fans, VOD is fine.
Well, I mean, the thing is there are some movies that are going to do better with a larger audience that you want to see in a theater like that, in a theater, and I don't think this is. You want to watch this with a very particular crowd with you, the friends you know, like if we had sat around and watched it or something like that, you don't really want to watch it with, this guy who doesn't know,
who just saw Kevin Smith's name on. I was like, I guess I'll go see that.
Sitting there and groans the whole time, or leaves, or
I'm not going to go to. I'm not going to take this to my parents' house and be like, oh my god, you have to see Tusk.
Yeah.
Well, I managed to see it with a pretty fervent Kevin Smith crowd, save for the people I was talking about who said they got ripped off. And it was a pretty good movie to see with a crowd. You just like some of the things I thought were really hilarious kind of fell on dead ears, and so I still laughed, but other people did. The reaction was not quite what I expected. Like it was both better and worse because there were parts like the end sequence. I think people wanted the movie set up to be a horror movie, and then when it's seen as like this is ridiculous, it is a ridiculous premise. So when it's sort of like ridiculous nature is revealed. I think a lot of people were underwhelmed, or like they expected the tone to be different, like for it to become a horror movie the way that, like Hostel does. Hostel starts as sort of like a dark comedy, or it tries to be, even though it's not very funny, and then it becomes a flat out horror movie, and I think that's what a lot of people expected. So I think a lot of people were underwhelmed by that element, but I thought it was hilarious. I don't think the audience was conned at all.
I thought this worked in the reverse. I thought it had some really nice, tensely done scenes early on when he passes out. When Howard Howe gets up out of the wheelchair and walks to him for the first time is really frighteningly done. You're like, holy shit, this guy can walk. And you figured that at that point, but seeing him do it and knowing that Wallace's character is drugged up and chained in this wheelchair, plus missing a leg, at least one at that point, and can't get away. I mean, it's a frightening sequence, and then it turns into this even wackier thing when he starts howling along with him, and that like this super nutty, like this guy is with a completely insane man.
Michael Parks, no one else could have done
like
that job.
Spider and the Fly thing is like he has just laid his trap in a fucking bathroom just for someone to stumble upon it to find him. Also, it was I kind of got a Misery vibe to the whole.
Absolutely, I think that's intentional.
Like Howard Howe's role in Justin Long's characters, just the idea that he kept consoling him, like, oh, it's fine. This is what's going to happen. Everything's fine, and it wasn't fine.
No, it wasn't. But I mean, there are some scenes that are just, and even like the Johnny Depp stuff that I talked about later, if it had been cut shorter, it would have been really great. I think it just went on for too long for too little payoff. I wanted more Johnny Depp in the final scene, and there wasn't any really. So it didn't set up something that had like a substantive payoff. But as far as having him play that character, and it's weird that like that character had so much impact because it was just a bundle of character ticks that I really thought were funny. Just the way that he was like. Also, it was great to see Johnny Depp play such a ridiculous character, but not take it so self-serious. I don't know the difference between like he's used like I'm accustomed to him looking weird, but here it felt more like genuine or something than it does in a lot of other movies where there's this big production around it. Like this character felt real and weird and shambling in an interesting way. I don't know.
Did you ever see the Onion article? It was like Johnny Depp, pile of scarves mistaken for Johnny Depp or something like that. It was something ridiculous. It's like Johnny Depp wants to be French. Like this was his dream role.
Well, I mean, I thought that was the thing though. What happens there is, because it's Johnny Depp, and I agree, he kind of got enamored with the having Johnny Depp to do this thing. It starts to get too indulgent in its spoofing of Canada at that point. It's like, starts to pull too much into it and starts to make the focus more on that. Let's make fun of Canada as opposed to the earlier Canada jokes were pretty awesome. Like the customs guy was fantastic.
Harley Morenstein,
one of my favorite scenes.
Great epic mealtime
was the way it was set up though, and that is that it was so serious about it. Mm-hmm. And then I thought the girls were great too with the hating the American.
I hate American guys.
And then
you can't say Hitler in an airport.
Yeah,
I laughed at that.
He gets his Degrassi reference in because he loved. I mean, I'm a big fan of Degrassi as well, and I still remember Jay and Silent Bob have a run on a few episodes of Degrassi at some point where or they come to the school. Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes do
Right.
as their characters, and so that was fun to see that come in because you knew he was going to do that at some point.
Yeah.
So-
I do, and I loved that they made fun of Justin Long's mustache because that was that mustache was ridiculous.
Well, it's supposed to be like a walrus mustache, and I think that's an interesting little touch. I mean,
His name's Wallace.
Kevin Smith's humor about Canucks is like a genuine loving kind of humor because he has a lot of Canadian fans and Scott Mosier is Canadian. And so like they talk about Canadian stuff on the podcast all the time. They will do entire episodes where it's just like news from Canada. So like when he makes fun of it is because he feels a weird kinship with Canada for some reason. And so like the fact that he's making a trilogy of movies about Canada shows that he's like he loves and is beloved by Canada.
How about I forgot what I was going to say.
I could talk about this movie for hours and just how much I love this era of Kevin Smith's career because this movie has something that not very many movies have. And like the scene with the spider and even later like the stuff with I wish it had been fleshed out more, but the scene where you figure out that Haley Joel Osment is having not an affair, but she's cheating on Justin Long, who is also, we find out, a cheater himself. Like he has no right to be angry about what's happening or anything, but the fact that he's a cheater.
Because when he says he has to get the whiteout.
Yeah.
I probably that's one of my least favorite parts of it. I really didn't, I wanted that scene with her talking directly to the camera to end and get back to what I thought was much more interesting at that point. Like it's fine.
Yeah.
To have added that into it, sure. I mean, it's great, but I didn't feel that added that much.
Did anybody else
to me at that point? I was kind of like, all right, let's go back to anything that has Michael Parks in it. This scene with her. I mean, and just the way it was. That was one of my. I thought this is still interesting stylistically. One of Kevin Smith's more interesting films.
Yeah,
to
it
look
looks
at
great.
and
Like
watch.
the movie has a.
At all.
It has a lot of color and it has a lot it has more camera moves than his movies usually do, which that's the big knock against Kevin Smith movies. And like I think Red State and Tusk are the two best looking movies he's done, regardless of like the quality of them. Which I really like Tusk. I mean I think that like visually this movie was really interesting. Which that's not something that he's naturally hasn't. Something for is like a visual style.
I told you what took me out of the movie was the charging the phones in the bathroom. I was like, are there no other fucking wall sockets?
That's a good point.
There
house?
might not be. If do they live in New York? Where's do they live in New York or LA? LA.
They're all in LA.
So they're probably in a tiny ass apartment somewhere in
I did
LA.
know.
I was actually surprised by how soon we got the walrus reveal. Like that,
Yeah,
I was like,
me
oh
too.
wow, that was
how
quick.
Long, how long in the movie is going to be? Oh, geez.
Yeah, and then I was expecting like the reveal at the end, but I was like, oh wow, we're getting a lot of walrus action in this movie.
It's kind of like Human Centipede, where I think they revealed. I think they blew their reveal too early. I think that's still one of that movie's problems is that movie needed a lot more setup than reveal, or it needed to be a lot shorter.
Well,
it needed to be a lot with
shorter.
The reveal at the very end. It's like, oh, okay.
And what I wanted this movie, I really wanted more. Like I wanted more explanation of how he was turned into a walrus. I was like, what did he do with his bones?
I don't know if you want to get too much into that because
we get
that's where things like this start to fall apart.
We get we get him and like Michael Parks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the suit his own suit. It's like, is Justin Long just sewn into the suit, or is this his skin?
Well, yeah, that's something Kate and I talked about. I think he was
at that point.
I think he was sewn, like his arms were sewn down, but I think he was sewn into the suit. Yeah, I don't know.
I like how at the very end is like, did they not talk to a doctor to see if this is okay? Like, can we fix this, doc?
Well, that's that's something the podcast does. Is they're like that they just think Kevin Smith thinks that is the most he becomes enamored with that. Like, this is going to be the most hilarious ending is if they go to visit him and they're carrying this fish in a like they say it during the podcast. Like they're gonna show up and he's gonna come out. And he's gonna be this. He has gone full walrus. They say.
Well, I mean,
that's what's over the credits. That discussion.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that's one of the things that I wondered too. Was like, was there a doctor consulted, or was this just like
Yeah.
how I have to live? This is life now. I'm a full walrus.
I
mean,
think
he doesn't have a tongue. He's missing his legs, and his arms are sewn to his body.
Do you
like
think?
this? And who knows how he's attached to that suit at this
I'm
point.
just thinking that maybe he could go and start his
And he has
own.
giant holes in his mouth.
He could start his own Beatles tribute band called Blubber Soul.
we are the walrus.
Blubber Soul.
Oh, I like that.
Blubber Soul. I like that. I think this movie owes a lot to 70s films in that the ending does not have to be logical so long as it shows like it is about the character and how the character sort of ends up. And I think this pays a lot to those 70s films where it's like, this is just how things are. It doesn't make any sense, but this is just how it is. And I kind of liked that.
Like the end of the black holes. Like, how did Maximilian Schnell get into that robot?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
It's just so, and it's just, and I like ending on this weird, sad kind of,
Yeah.
like like where it makes him different. They can cry, and he cries. So is he still human?
Yeah.
Or is he all
Is he
walrus?
human or
And then,
is he
and
walrus?
then that's where we get the song, and that's Kevin Smith laughing so hard time at this, and then the song plays over, and he starts making up these lyrics, and Scott Mosier's like, "Is that a real song?" And he's like, "No, I just made it up."
I really wish they had gotten the Killers to remake "Are We Human" or "Are We Walrus"? Are we human or are we walrus? No, I don't, because it'd been funny.
I
My
don't know what it
mind's
would've
funny.
been.
The week the movie came out, Kevin Smith even flew in the guy who wrote the article that inspired this whole thing. Because when they first read this, it was this quaint little art, like written almost word for word from the basically British Craigslist article. That's what inspired the movie, and they thought it was real. They're like and it is feasible that there is someone out there who, and I don't know if they put this in the movie or not, but what the article originally asked was that you have free room and board in this really great part of Brighton or whatever, but the only requirement is that for 2 hours a night you have to wear a walrus suit and behave only like a walrus for 2 hours every night. And there's a part of me that thinks there's someone out there who would actually want something like this. There has to be. Because
you have to be fucked as a walrus?
No, you have to do the walrus noise and you have to catch fish in your mouth. That's what the article says. Like that's what the listing says. And there has to be. I mean, there was a story several years ago about a guy who on eBay or Craigslist or something who asked for someone to kill. Like he wanted to kill and eat someone, and there was someone in the world who wanted to be murdered and eaten. And oddly, it happened in Germany.
Wasn't that an episode of?
Well, they made a movie out of it. I'm pretty sure it's in Germany where that guy
Yeah.
was. I think that's a horrific. I mean, I think that's a really great horrific way to come into a movie like this. Though, is the same idea of like where Howard Howe had his story that he got somebody to come for, but then you don't make them part of it. Like, and that's makes it the horrific part. But in the real life, yeah, you're right. Somebody read that and chose to go and be eaten by this guy.
What's the show with the British show with the guy from Dark Place?
I don't know.
The tech support guy.
Oh, the IT.
The IT. Wasn't there like an episode where he mistakenly thought like they wanted to eat together, and the German guy's like, "No, I wanted to eat you," and they're like, "Oh, misunderstanding."
Probably. I haven't watched either of the seasons in a while. Funny show though. If you haven't watched the IT Crowd, watch it.
It's
highly recommended.
This movie, I mean, the plausibility of like the premise of this just shows that humanity has no depths. Like wherever you think like humanity can go, humanity, close to Mars, can go no lower, then humanity will prove you wrong.
Tusk.
Like humanity will prove you wrong. Like it can always go to a lower, and they found out later that this was just like there's a guy who does these kinds of pranks. Like he started before this, he started writing to his local newspaper saying that there was it was like a local message board in his neighborhood that there was a black hole opening in his neighborhood, and wrote increasingly distressed letters to whomever about like it's bigger, and I think that the local cats are disappearing, and you might want to come check on this. Like writing some like local bureaucratic group. So this is kind of a thing that he does. But I mean, it inspired this piece of art that I really like. It is a piece of art itself, and like inspired this thing that I really like. So it's a weird convergence of like meta here So-
Yeah, it sounds like you're just describing safety not guaranteed.
Mhm.
This guy has created all sorts of offshoots of films just from his Craigslist.
I know.
There are plenty of like the people who post their interactions with people from Craigslist by like I mean, I can see it as a great fodder for creating your own idea of what people are willing to go to, like the links people are willing to go to for something interesting.
Well, I mean, the podcast My Brother and Me is composed entirely of Yahoo, like these crazy brothers answering Yahoo Yahoo Answers questions, like, can I get pregnant from sitting on a toilet seat? Like, or just the most bizarre questions. I mean, the internet, I'm surprised that more of what we consume, like movies, television, books, like isn't more concerned with the sorts of bizarre things that are on the internet. Like the internet is a dark, weird place that contains the entirety of humanity.
And they're out there and they have free reign to just comment and make posts of their own and without ever worry about someone questioning.
I know,
them.
like it. I mean, Neil Stephenson he should be releasing a book a year about just the bizarre nature of the internet, like the weird paradoxes of the internet.
How big those are going to be?
And like even like as far as like even on YouTube, I won't even scroll down to look at the first comment because of what
Talk about black holes too.
Yeah,
You get sucked into that.
And you're like, oh my god, and you're like, I am not going to even look at the comments on this. And even if I read an article on the Huffington Post, I'm like, guess who's not going to read the comments on this section?
Because you never can anticipate what people are going to think about a particular topic. But yeah, it's weird. Do we need to talk about the third act of this film? Like, do we need to talk about the end and how we felt about it or anything like that? As far as like
he becomes a walrus and he is doomed to walrusity.
I will say that the thing that I think Kevin Smith was also trying to make his Silence of the Lambs here a little bit too, just a more messed up version. So it's kind of missing the more of the investigation. It felt like the investigation was. I also thought that the scene where they go visit the local. Brian, what are you doing? I kind of like where they go visit the local cop, the constable or whatever in the Canadian town, the conversation that they have where they're trying to explain how they're looking him up and how why they're there. I love that scene. I kind of wish there was more of that sort of bizarro investigative detective story kind of stuff in it.
Instead of the Johnny Depp just over the top French, the Quebecois.
I did like him with the scene he had with that Michael Parks character was fantastic.
I get it,
oh yeah,
God, he was fantastic.
Also, when they, I did like when he goes back to the convenience store. And asked for the notepad where he'd written the address down, and traces it out. He's like, "Oh my god, that's just what they did in the Big Lebowski. That's where I got it from. That's where exactly I got it from."
Such a bizarre movie. I mean, this movie.
What was the name of the drink? It was like Big or
a Big Chug I think, or a big
Chug Lug. Chug Lug. Yeah, that was
Chug Lug. Yeah.
Chug Lug.
Chug Lug. So yeah, I mean, the end of the movie we find that Michael Parks' character is a serial killer who has taken up residence at this house and taken on a persona, and they track him down, but just at the height of the tension. And so the climax of this movie is two walrus people fighting to the death.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And Justin Long has to become full walrus.
Over the top.
Ridiculous.
Like, when they showed Michael Parks when he was in his walrus suit, I was like, "Holy shit!"
Well, and I kind of like the ending where he says, to make it out, you have to defeat me. The speech there was just amazing, like an amazing speech.
Well, when he also makes it unfair, though, he turns you into an animal which shouldn't be able to beat the man, and then he sits here, all right, well, now I'm just going to be a dude again, and I'm going to kill you because, I'm not going to let you win. But then he actually does he gets it because he goes full walrus.
Goes full walrus. That's what they call it in the podcast. I think
all I kept thinking too was when he's jabbing him with his tusks, is like how much that would hurt my teeth. Like, oh God, are those wounds fresh? Can you feel those wounds?
I'm sure that everything in him was hurting at that point. There had to have been no anesthetic at that point.
And those were his own leg bones.
Yeah,
carved into the tusks. Yeah,
I did. Yeah, you're right.
He mentions that at one point because they mentioned earlier how the guy had pieces of his own tibia or fibula
in his teeth. Yeah, he found
in the mouth holes.
Yeah, were you disappointed or like happy to see what was your reaction to the Tusk? The walrus outfit, like what did you think?
I thought the thing is it was suitably creepy. I mean, it needed to be. I mean, it wouldn't have been nearly as much fun if they'd actually turned him into something that looked like an actual walrus. I like the fact that it looked like some sort of hairless skinned walrus.
Yeah. Do you think it looked too rubbery? Do you think that was on purpose? What do you think as far as
I did. I liked it. I thought it was as creepy as I wanted it to be, with his eyes being so
and the
obvious, and the hair, because the hair is going to be fake or wherever you're going to get it from to get that kind of tough. I thought it was very suitably creepy.
What if they had kept the mustache?
And the fact that anybody could visit that like weird zoo park at the end and like just see.
Do they have anything else?
I don't know. There's just a walrus man in there.
It's weird because it almost is like a metaphor for some kind. I don't know. Like I was going to come up with some hypothesis about it, how it could be a metaphor for like the performer always, like no matter what the stage, a performer always needs a stage of some. But I guess it was like an animal sanctuary or conservatory or something. But it was obviously very run down. It seems like he would live in the lap of luxury. Like this story breeds like a lap of luxury. Like he should have his own tank at some weird, like formal, not in some backwoods like petting zoo.
You imagine Captain Spaulding ran that or something.
Yeah,
I get it.
Canada's Captain Spaulding.
And what happened to why couldn't he just live in the house in the weird?
Well, whose house was it? That becomes the question.
Well, they're dating. Wouldn't it be weird to have your ex-boyfriend walrus to live with you? I used to date him. He'll be fine. Just throw him a fish. I want to see the sequel.
Who I felt really sorry for at the very end was Haley Joel Osment's character, because you kind of get the feeling that they're kind of together now. But the way she talks to Wallace there at the end is like, so you still love that walrus guy more than me, is what I really kind of feel here. Like
I can imagine like the conversation on the ride home is like, why are you so quiet? Oh, I don't know, because you want to fuck a walrus.
The fights that couple has, those have to be the worst.
And literally a fight no one on earth has ever had to have before.
I know.
It's true.
I mean, what would you even do if you guys were alone together? He doesn't even think you're a person. He just thinks you're someone who feeds him.
I mean, did you see that walrus penis on the mantle? I mean, is he jamming that? Is that what you're craving?
He literally has wood, okay?
Penis? Didn't you just describe a lot of men, though, and their feelings about women?
Yeah.
He's the person who feeds you. He doesn't even think of you as a person.
Yeah, I mean, that could be a metaphor for people who want people who don't treat them well.
Yeah.
It's, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. Am I right? Look who can quote lyrics to songs. So yeah, I say check out Tusk, man.
I really did like this film.
I did too. Yeah,
it's fucking bizarre.
Really did, yeah.
It is bizarre, but bizarre in the right way.
No movies do this anymore, and it was interesting.
Well, I just think it showed that Kevin Smith still has some interesting stories to tell and ways to tell them, and interesting and funny things to say in his dialogue, which has always been one of his strong suits. Is his dialogue, and I thought that was back much more on par in this, because I think part of Red State's problem is he thought he was making a horror movie. He wasn't making a horror movie, but yet it also wasn't funny.
I think Red State was a stepping stone for him. Like it was a transitional fossil.
And I just think with this, though, he found something. He latched onto something that he could do the thing he does well, which is comedy, and then also put it on top of a spoofy kind of horror framework that he still could do some chilling kind of scenes and some gross out stuff and have fun with that, but still ultimately make a comedy, which is still what he's best at. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, he's a funny guy, and I mean, he writes funny stuff.
Yeah, and this movie was funny. There were parts where I laughed uproariously.
Yeah, and it's just like you said, weird too, and I think it's got some good horror moments in it as well. Yeah. I mean, I still think like you said, it's a chilling kind of scary scene because I like he shot it differently too. Is when Michael Parks gets up from the wheelchair and then you pull back to the long shot outside of the house. And you're looking in the windows and you're seeing both the people there and him cross the distance between the two of them there. And it's kind of a frightening sequence there. And then he hits him and then they start howling.
No.
Such a great sequence there too, because it's just weird. Like some things don't have to be scary; they just have to be like weird,
creepy. Like they creep you out. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the True North trilogy. I think they're already filming Yoga Hosers, so we'll see. That should be out next year. And even though it did poor financially, I mean, it was the catalyst for Clerks 3 getting funded. So
as far as does poorly too, I think Kevin Smith movies had to be judged by a different thing as well. I mean, they've never been box office.
He was
that's not his thing. I mean, there's always video is where Clerks really found its life on video and DVD and Laserdisc even.
Right.
Was
where he says fuck DVD.
Yeah, and I think at this point he's going to be a kind of a VOD kind of guy. That's why I agree with you guys. I wish this had come out on that first because I think he's good for that. I think that's a good place for him, and I think his movies, I bet when they look at it ultimately, they will have made
the money
good
back.
Bit once you calculate in
over time.
Downloads and things like that.
Once
people get to it, unless people are just stealing it, I guess.
No, I mean, it's going to be on Netflix.
I have no problem buying this on Blu-ray when it came out. I bought the digital one too, so we could watch it. So
it's a movie I'd like to see all the special features of. Like that's the interesting part.
I would love to hear his commentary.
I'm sure had the podcast on there, the Smodcast, and
I almost think that you could do a dual director's commentary where you have one that is the podcast episode playing alongside the running time of the movie, and also like have an actual director's commentary with Scott Mosier and Kevin Smith. I think that would be amazing.
Kevin Smith is like, I mean, besides the kind of like pioneer of podcasting and making it popular, but like his commentaries on DVDs were like best. What made me buy his DVDs. Like when he when they did the Chasing Amy, or maybe it was Mallrats, and Ben Affleck was on there, and he kept referring to Ben Affleck as Phantom's Ben Affleck. Like the fact that they could just like poke fun at each other without getting mad made me like, God damn, this is amazing. This is like, these guys are great.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's amazing. So I definitely say check out Tusk. I mean, it's a weird movie, but if you listen to this podcast, you're going to be in for it.
He loved commentary so much, and he talked about it, that they let him do the Roadhouse commentary because he kept commenting about how he would love to do Roadhouse if it came out on DVD. So
that's awesome. So I say check it out.
Certainly.
Yeah, go see Tusk or rent Tusk or buy Tusk. Download it, watch it on your
preferred device.
The preferred device, yeah.
I say yeah. And don't forget to find us online too, and go rate and review the podcast on iTunes. That's going to help us out. Check us out on Stitcher. Everywhere else.
And review.
Rate.
Oh.
Old Brian got excited.
Woo. Yeah, and don't forget, guys, we're the HorrorBull HorrorBull
PCAST
on Twitter, right? And the HorrorBull Horror.
We're the bull. We'll give you the horns.
Podcast. We have a woman bull having her time of the month. Just remember that. Visual,
no, she's murdering people.
No, she's having her period.
All right,
guys. I'm Brian.
I'm Tyler.
And I'm Drew.
And thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the HorrorBull Podcast.